In the summer of 1947, after nearly 90 years, the British Raj finally ended. India was free. But freedom in this series never arrives without paperwork, and the paperwork of 1947 was the strangest of all, because the country was not simply being handed back, it was being split in two. India and Pakistan, born in the same hour, out of the same body. And when you split a state, you have to split everything it owns: the land, the army, the treasury, the railways, and, it turned out, right down to the desks, the typewriters, and the books on the library shelves. Tonight, we read the most literal ledger in the whole story of the Raj, the invoice that came with independence itself. It began with a border that did not yet exist, and a man who had never seen the country he was asked to divide. His name was Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer, and he was given a task of almost unimaginable weight on an almost unimaginably short clock. Draw the line. Decide which districts of Punjab and Bengal would go to India, and which to the new state of Pakistan. Settle, with a pen and a few maps, where one homeland ended and another began. And he was given only a matter of weeks to do it. The Radcliffe Line cut through provinces, through farmland, in places through villages, separating fields from the wells that watered them, communities from the cities that had always served them. The human consequences were immense and grievous. In the months around partition, vast numbers of people crossed the new border in both directions, and there was terrible communal violence in which very many lost their lives. We do not dwell on that suffering for spectacle, and we do not reduce it to a number. It deserves its own remembrance, and it has it. But our lens in this series is the ledger. And so tonight, while holding that human cost in mind, we follow what the politicians and clerks spent those same weeks arguing over: the assets. Because when an empire withdraws and one country becomes two, someone has to divide the machinery of the state. A committee was set up to do exactly that, to take the entire apparatus of British India and split it between the two new nations by an agreed share. The cash balances in the treasury had to be divided, the public debt had to be divided, the civil servants had to choose or be assigned a side. Every department that had once governed a single subcontinent now had to be cut into two working governments almost overnight. And the principle was, on its face, simple. Pakistan, as the smaller and newer state, would receive an agreed proportion of the shared assets and shoulder an agreed proportion of the shared debts. But a state is not a number on a page. A state is things, physical things. And that is where the partition ledger turns from the grand to the almost unbelievable. Consider the two greatest assets the Raj left behind: the army and the railways. The British Indian Army, that vast force we spent a whole episode following, the one India had paid for down to the last rupee, now had to be divided between two countries that might, one day, point it at each other. Regiments were split. Soldiers and officers were sorted, often by faith, often by choice, toward India or Pakistan. Equipment, stores, and weapons had to be apportioned. A single fighting machine, built over generations, was cut in two in a matter of months. And then the railways. The iron network that an earlier episode showed was sold to India as a gift and charged to India as a debt. That network did not respect the new border either. Track ran across the Radcliffe Line. Locomotives and carriages had to be counted and divided. Trains that began their journeys in one new country ended them in the other. Even the rolling stock of empire had to be shared out, wagon by wagon. And now we arrive at the detail that, more than any treaty, captures what 1947 truly was. When the division reached the offices themselves, it did not stop at the grand assets. It went all the way down. The furniture of government had to be split, the tables and the chairs. The typewriters were counted and shared between the two new administrations. Even the books in the libraries were divided between India and Pakistan, volume by volume, shelf by shelf. And where a set could not be sensibly split, officials are remembered to have argued over who would keep which half. There is something almost unbearably human in that image. Two brand new nations, born in violence and hope, with civil servants bent over inventories of inkwells and dictionaries, deciding who gets the chairs. It would be comic if it were not the wreckage of a single shared country being parceled out across a brand new border. This was the most literal accounting the empire ever produced. The Raj had spent 90 years turning India into entries in a ledger. At the very end, the ledger came due and was carried out item by item down to the last typewriter. But there was one entry in the 1947 ledger that pointed the other way. For once, the debt was not India's, it was Britain's. During the Second World War, India had supplied the empire on an enormous scale: soldiers, materials, food, and money, much of it bought by Britain on credit. By the end of the war, Britain owed India a very large sum for all of it, held as what were called the sterling balances, money London genuinely owed to Delhi. The figure is often cited at around £1.33 billion, an immense amount for the time. Here, at last, was a bill running in the opposite direction. After almost a century of India paying for its own conquest, its own army, its own railways, the books showed Britain in debt to India. But how that balance was actually settled, how much could be drawn, how quickly, on what terms, and worth how much by the time it was, is a tangled and contested story, shaped by a Britain that was itself nearly bankrupt after the war. The drain, it turned out, did not simply reverse the moment it was acknowledged. So this is how the Raj ended. Not with a clean handover, but with an inventory. A line drawn in weeks, an army split, a railway divided, a treasury apportioned, and the furniture of empire shared out, typewriter by typewriter, book by book. Independence is rightly remembered as a triumph, two nations, free at last. But our lens shows you the other thing that 1947 was. It was a closing of accounts. The bill the empire had been writing since 1858 was finally totaled, divided, and handed over, along with a debt owed to India that would prove far easier to record than to collect. Which leaves one last question, and it is the question this whole series has been building toward. After 90 years of bills, drains, and ledgers, what did the empire actually cost India? And did anyone ever pay it back? Next time, the series finale. The bill comes due. Tareekh ka Hisaab. History audited. Hisaab abhi baki hai. The account isn't settled yet.